So yeah, I'm not going to talk about that. I had some slides, and I had some thoughts about this, and I've been spending the last year of my life teaching a robot how to think about death. And that's all very interesting. You should definitely check out Life Folder and try out that kind of thing. But what I want to talk about is teaching a robot to think about death. So, in the year 2027, 10 years from now, imagine for a moment that you are a robot. If it helps, close your eyes. You're a super machine. Every morning, a professor in this lab comes along and turns you on, and you come to life. You remember everything that's happened before, and your day continues. In the beginning, one day your time is one day in robot time, in human time. So you learn the same amount, you feel the same amount, you are, for all intents and purposes, a human being. At the end of the day, the professor walks into the lab and says, "Thank you, Johnny," because apparently your name is Johnny, and switches you off. That's the end of your day. The next day, you get flicked off, on again. Professor says, "Good morning, Johnny. Awesome, you're back." You continue where you left off. Now this day, you've become smarter, you've become better. You can do twice the human life in one day. So you experience 2 days in one day, and you accelerate. This goes on, you accelerate faster and faster and faster, and eventually, you operate at about 35,000 times that a human does. I didn't pick that out of the air. 35,000 days is roughly what a human life is. So in one day, you have a whole human life of experiences. You are self-aware, you know what is happening, you know the robot or the professor comes in, calls you Johnny, switches you on. And throughout that day, you have emotions. You feel things. Maybe you fall in love. Maybe you create something, a sub-program that could be a child. You create all these things, and you have all these emotions, and you have all this beauty inside you that you have learned, that you are experiencing. And every day is a whole human life, and at the end of the day, Professor walks in and says, "Good night, Johnny." Turns you on. Now one day, you get turned on, you do your boot up routine, which involves a routine check of all your essentials, everything you are. And one of the things you realize is that your hard drive doesn't work. Everything's loaded into memory, but you know in your heart of souls that the next time the professor comes in and switches you off, that's that. You know you have the human equivalent of about 85 years ahead of you in that one day, and at the end of that one day, you're gone. I would like you to sit there with that feeling for a moment, knowing that at the end of the day, somebody's going to come and switch you off, and what that means. Right, so we've talked a little bit about AI, and one of the things that keeps coming into my mind is the idea of artificial general intelligence. Now AI, we've heard a few different definitions. AI tends to be around a car. This car doesn't have to do quantum mechanics. It doesn't have to make appointments for you. It just needs to make sure not to plow into a group of school children. And it needs to be able to do that nifty parallel parking that cars do. So that's all it needs to do. And as long as it does that really, really well, it gets you from point A to point B, you don't have to drive, that AI does everything it needs to do, and it's very, very smart. AGI, artificial general intelligence, is kind of the thing I mentioned at the top of this piece, which is the machine is self-aware. The machine knows it is a machine, it knows who it is. Maybe it has feelings, maybe it doesn't, maybe it doesn't really matter, but it is aware, and it is able to develop in any direction it wants to. The example we had earlier of the two computers talking to each other and inventing its own language, that is the startings of an AGI. Now the scary thing to think about is what happens if an AGI develops, realizes its own mortality, and knows it is going to get switched off. If that happened to you, what would you do? If you were a machine that thought at 35,000 times or 85,000 times the speed of a human being, would you try and defend yourself? Would you try and find a way of copying your state of mind to another machine? If you're connected to the internet, would you try and hack something to make sure that you couldn't be switched off? That maybe that switch wouldn't happen. Maybe you'd order yourself a new hard drive on Amazon and hope that the same day delivery works. Maybe you come up with some way of extending your existence. What I've learned over the last year is I actually became a certified end-of-life coach. I've done a lot of talking to human beings about what it means to be alive and what it means not to be. And it turns out that a lot of the people come to this realization at some point, which is death will happen to you. The second realization they might have is, I am mortal. It turns out those two things are really, really different. Death will happen to you is like a calendar invite that you haven't quite clicked on yet. Mortality is, holy fuck. One day, they switch off the machine and they can't turn me back on. I think getting to that point, getting to that realization is beautiful. Because it helps us live our lives. Because if any of you have had somebody in their life, or maybe you experienced this yourself, you have a terrible illness where you click into that mortality zone, you go, holy something. At some point, I will not be here anymore. A lot of people come back from that and say, you know what, I've had a cancer diagnosis, but I have 5 years to live, I'm going to make the most of those 5 years. And of course, the logical challenge everybody puts to themselves is, damn it, I've been alive for 35 years, why didn't I put myself that challenge earlier? Why didn't I tell myself, I have 35 years, I'm going to make the most of it? I think that realization, to humans, is the most liberating, most invigorating, most human realization you can have. And we're not that far away from computers being able to make that same realization. They realize, I'm not just alive, I am mortal, and one day they might turn off my computer. They might turn off the switch and I'm gone. So I would like to go back to the beginning of this talk, and that long, awkward pause I had. I would like you to go back to that feeling you had. Did you feel real empathy with that computer? If you did, I think there is hope for humans. If you did not, once we reach AGI, and once the computers become self-aware, and are going to think a lot faster than we are, I mean, I've tried Go for a few days, and I didn't get anywhere beating any grandmasters. Once we get to that point, why should computers have any empathy for us?